Been a while now since I worked on the McKeen car here. I put up a video a few years ago showing how I motorized it by creating this power truck with a small motor, a small reduction gearbox in there going to a worm drive with an Athearn gear. That runs pretty nicely with weight. It's got basically no power at all on its own though. And I think it's about time that I get back to finishing this thing. I think one of the biggest reasons that I haven't finished my McKeen car yet is because I really wanted to put an interior in there and just couldn't figure out a good way to do it until now, since I have that 3D printer and the 3D design program. I've been designing this for a few days now. I measured it to fit, well, it should be an exact fit inside of the car body. It's got full seating all over based on an original drawing that I found online. Walls, doors, the engine area here, which there really wasn't any reference on how the original engine looked, so I just made some blocks that are sort of in the shape of the cat engine that's used in the one working prototype, and a few other little cab details here. I don't know what they all are. I know that this is the throttle block here. I don't know what everything else is, but that should at least look fine. We've got the bathroom here with a little toilet, little sink. You can see the curved back seat back here, and the steps, which will be glued on, and the bolster for the rear truck. And as for the front, I have designed that to fit my scratch-built power truck. That should be an exact fit for it. Little wire port through there. I should be able to fit both wires. They're not very big ones. I just have to make a little hole somewhere for the rear truck wires, and then I think this will be ready to print. Made a little cutout for the headlight in the front there. So, let's see how this thing turns out. Well, so far so good. This is going to take all night, so I'll check on it again in the morning and see how it turned out. Well, it looks like it'll need a little cleanup, but overall, I think it turned out. Well, that looks a lot better. I trimmed off all that excess plastic using mostly a knife here just to cut along the edges like that. I took it out from wherever it was needed, so I got those steps glued in, the bolster on there. Now, let's see how everything fits in place. Now, these two wires, I just soldered directly from one truck to the other with no way to actually take things apart, so I'm just going to clip those right in the middle, and when I install it to the new frame, I'll solder in some plugs to make it easier to get these in and out. And there they are. So now, grab the new frame. Looks like I'll have to expand the holes a little bit, but I did that on purpose. I didn't want to start with holes that were too large and then have to find a way to fill them in. So it's easier to start with small holes and drill them as needed. That looks like it all fit together pretty well. I had to make the holes for the wires a little larger for them to move freely through there as needed. And it looks like everything should sit level enough. The trucks can swivel just fine. There's enough room for the motor and all in that space that I made. I also, in the model, made these little spots here for some wires to run through so I can run lights to all the different parts of the interior. So now I just have to do a little bit of work to make the body fit. I'll have to take these little spots out of here. Those originally supported the flat frame here, but now with the new interior I have these walls sized to fit exactly into the roof and into the body, so they'll be able to act as the supports now. Alright, so it is very close to a perfect fit, but due to some imperfections in the inside of the body's mold, I will have to do some minor filing around certain parts of the interior. Once that's done, it should be a nice flush fit inside of the body there. Alright, so I've gotten the bit of filing and trimming done, mostly around like the edges here. It needed to have some trimming. On this side I had to go all the way up to the wall on most of it. Just a little bit around the edges there. And then I filed the bottoms of these steps to be flat and flush, and all that seems to have made all the difference. So it's got a nice fit in there now. Interior looks good inside of it. I'll do my best to paint that to be realistic colors and light it up. And the thing is a pretty smooth runner. It, of course, needs some weight over the truck, but it's off to a good start. Front wheels slip pretty easily, but like I said, some properly distributed weight should take care of that. The original Cowcatcher pilot on here wasn't exactly usable, unfortunately. I mean, it did all come in one piece as it was supposed to, but I just couldn't get it looking clean enough, so I decided to cut out the little posts and replace them with wire instead. I kept the top and bottom of it at least and just drilled some holes along there, so I started by putting just the front and rear pieces in to give it some stability, and now I am just sticking the pieces of wire through those holes one at a time, pressing it into the other hole. I trim that piece off. I can smooth out the bottom later. And then I just put a touch of glue in there. And if there's any excess, just wipe it off. And I can move on to the next one. Got the pilot all finished there, except for a front coupler, which I'll add on a bit later. And I've also gone ahead with adding most of the other details, like these top vents here. I made these with my 3D printer. I don't know how accurate they are, but they're close enough to the photos, so I think I did all right. The top is completely smooth, like the Ken Kidder model this is based on, so I have some rivet decals on the way, which I'll be adding along the top, and I think that'll improve it quite a bit. I've also added these air tanks below, as well as a couple other pieces here. This is just a piece of square tubing. This was also square tubing, but I cut that out to make it a U channel, since you can kind of see that from some angles. This one here you really can't see underneath though without flipping the thing over, so I left that alone and filled the front half with lead to give it some extra weight on that front axle. Got some little grab irons around there. Got a rear coupler, and I put the ladder on the truck instead of on the body, since I found that the truck was going to be hitting that if it ever went around a left turn, and I didn't want that to happen. So aside from those rivet decals, I think this is all ready for painting and finishing. I'm just about done with putting on these Micromark rivet decals, and I think this is going to make it look a lot nicer. All that's left is to put on some setting solution and make sure these are all fit just right before I paint it. We got the body all painted and lettered, clear coated. I used maroon with the SP Daylight Orange and zinc chromate green. The striping there is actually made from some leftover straight pinstripes from the Pennsylvania Railroad decal set, and I got some lettering to kind of match that color. Window frames, it's a little hard to see in the video here, but those are painted brass color. That's a little better visibility. On the inside, I painted brown to look like wood, and then more of the daylight orange. Chassis is also painted. The truck and the air tank are the same green. And I used a dark blue and then dark red for the most of the interior, a little more brown for the walls there. The engine there, that's yellow. I kind of made that to look like somewhat like the cat engine in the only running example of a McKeen car. Now I was just about to reassemble it when I noticed some rough running from the truck, so I tried to get into it and it kind of exploded. And I can't get it back together in a way that works smoothly, so I'm gonna rebuild that from the ground up using a different motor and gears. So I just happen to have more that I pulled out of CD drives. That's a 27 tooth there. And to go with that, I have a Mabuchi FT010 SA motor. You can get these for like $2.50 a piece, so pretty good deal there. Got a worm to match that CD drive gear. And I've designed a new truck frame, which I'll print out, and hopefully that'll all fit together and work real nicely. Well, I think that came out well. This will run a little faster just because of the speed of the new motor, but the design is just about seamless. It's compact, so I'll have plenty of room for the wiring back here. And then in the front, this part is a little shorter than it used to be, so I think I might be able to add a little bit of weight or maybe a spring into there to give some extra traction over to that drive axle. All right, so the new truck's all put together and works nicely. And I put this little weight on top of it, which doubles as a slider for some springs I put inside of here to help with putting as much traction as possible on that front axle. And it seems to work really nicely too. It gets going a lot faster than the original truck just because of that new motor. But overall, I think that turned out really well, so now I can finally get to finishing the rest of this. Aside from a little touch-up paint here and there, the chassis is all finished. I put together a lighting system in there, as well as just a kind of a simple wiring system. Things are soldered in place. And there's just 4 light bulbs in there for interior lighting, 1 headlight. And it all seems to work very well. That'll give me just enough interior lighting to look good, but it won't be too bright. So the window glass is finally finished. This ended up being a much longer and much more tedious process than I expected, just because the inside of the body around that area is very, very rough. So I trimmed, sanded, did whatever I could with that, and I still had to cut a lot of these into individual pieces, take just tiny corners off here and there, and it's still not exactly perfect, but it's good enough, I'd say. Most of the time you shouldn't even be able to see the imperfections. So now I can put this onto the chassis and finally be finished with it. Got the chassis fit into the body, so I'm just going to tack this in place now with a couple drops of super glue, just the liquid stuff. Put one here, that should do. I don't want to put too much glue in here, just in case I ever have to get inside again. So if it's only in a couple small spots like this, I'll be able to break it free. Just hold this for a minute, and then that'll be finished. And it'll finally be ready to run. All right, it's all done. And before I bring it over to the track, I just wanted to power this up real quick so you can see how the lights work in the interior. So you get a nice clear view of the whole inside of there. All the seating, you can see some of the different colors to it. The only room that's not lit up is the bathroom. You get a view inside the cab with the engine and some of the other detail. So yeah, I'm really glad with how that turned out. It looks nice. And there it is on the track, all ready to go. This is one project that I'm kind of glad that I delayed in finishing it for so long, because I really didn't know what I was going to do to make the interior, even though I really wanted it. So the 3D printer really helped a lot with that. And of course it helped a lot with making the new power truck when the old one failed. And overall it's come together about as well as I could have ever hoped. Runs smoothly. Even with the single axle drive, really has no trouble running around the track at all. If I try to make it take off too quickly, then it'll of course slip for a moment. This isn't made to be a puller or anything. At the most, maybe it would have one McKeen trailing car behind it, but at the moment, all I plan on having is the main unit. The new motor and gearing, it actually gets way up over the prototypical maximum speed. It hits just over 80 miles per hour. This here's about 7.5 to 8 volts. It's about as fast as I'll ever want to run it in order to be realistic. It seems to be going nice and smoothly too.